Welcome to the Project ZooLab Technology Training. I'm going to walk you through some of the things that you'll need to be successful in administering the technology in the broadcast side of Project ZooLab. The first thing we're going to talk about is the Dropbox. All of your teacher resources should have been emailed to you via a Dropbox. What a Dropbox is a very large capacity file sharing system. So instead of emailing something where an attachment is too large, like video and photo cards and things like that, we've given you access to a Dropbox. Now the Dropbox, when you log into it, you can download the entire file, everything on there as a zip file. You can go to the blue box at the top and click download, and it'll probably take about 15 or 20 minutes to download the entirety of all of the files. You can also opt to right-click and download on each file as you need them. So it won't take you as long, it'll only take you about 30 seconds at a time. Keep in mind to save that link to the Dropbox, because as the class goes on and there's new information or the zoo provides us with new videos, we'll go ahead and upload those for you to use. So pre-recorded footage, which we'll get into later as a backup, all of those things will be found on your Dropbox. Next, we're going to talk about our actual broadcasting system. In order to receive the broadcast, you will need your laptop, and you will also need a projector or a speaker so the kids can see on a large screen, like a white wall or a video screen, or even on just a whiteboard, that you can project the image up large so that all of your students can view it at the same time. To start, you'll go to www.projectzoolab.com. This is our homepage. You're going to find news sections. You're going to find a bonus section where all of our bonus clips for the week are. You're going to find an assessment tab where there's going to be a pre and a post assessment for the class that your students can take as a group. And you're also going to find a video button. When you click on the video button, you're going to open up your new screen, and it will have the live stream, which is our live broadcasting system. When you click on that, you should be fine to run the broadcast. You're going to see the broadcast on the left-hand side of the screen, and then your chat is going to run down the right-hand side of the screen. To use the chat, there's going to be a little login button at the bottom. Next to the login button, there's a little pencil. Now, if you click on the pencil, it's going to give you the option to create a nickname for your students to use for the live chat. Your nickname can be your district, so maybe DV for Deer Valley, and then Independence, the name of your school, or PV for Paradise Valley, and Liberty, the name of your school. It really helps the hosts to chat back and to recognize your students or your class by name. So it's always a good job to have some sort of a handle or a nickname where we can recognize you. Remember, you're just creating a nickname, no need to log in, create a live stream account, or anything of the sort. Lastly, I want to talk about backups and technical difficulties. In the Dropbox, which we talked about just a couple minutes ago, we are going to upload some pre-recorded footage. If for any reason there's a technical difficulty and you cannot get onto the broadcast, you can go ahead and show the corresponding week's footage. It'll be about a 3-minute clip, so you'll have to improvise as a teacher, fill in those blanks just in case there is a technical difficulty. So your backups will be located on the Dropbox. Secondly, we recommend that you use Firefox. It is the recommended browser. If you can't use Firefox, go ahead and use another web browser, but make sure that all of your other windows are closed, not just minimized or down at the bottom of your screen. If you have extra browsers open or extra windows open, it can lead to an echo in your broadcast where you'll hear the host reverbing behind it, and it's not very pleasant or easy for the students to understand. Also, if you end up with technical difficulties, we find the best way to transmit our broadcast is to hardwire your computer into the wall. So if you can check out an Ethernet cord from your technician, if you have a laptop where you can just plug straight into the wall and into your computer. If you do opt to go hardwired instead of wireless, which we recommend, up at the top of your screen or the bottom if you're using a PC, you're going to want to turn your airport off, and you will get the most effective broadcast that way. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact our department at 602-449-2199, and we look forward to seeing you on the first day of broadcasting. And now I'm going to turn you over to Liesl from the Phoenix Zoo, and she will go through an overview of the program and the curriculum. Have a great day.
Hello, teachers. My name is Liesl, and I am the Manager of Education at the Phoenix Zoo. Today I'm going to be walking you through the Project Zoo Lab curriculum, and you will also be seeing more of me throughout the Project Zoo Lab broadcasts, as I'll be helping out our host. Her name is Serena, and she won't be here with us today, but you'll be getting to see a lot of her, obviously, throughout the season. We're going to, as I said, review the curriculum, so hopefully you are all able to follow along with the curriculum packet that has been provided on the Dropbox folder for you, or if you weren't able to access that, perhaps you have a CD with the files. But hopefully you've been able to print this out and will be able to follow along. If you haven't, maybe you want to press pause and print it out and then come back and start us up again. I'm going to be using the 3rd through 5th grade teacher guide. But for those of you that have classes that are kindergarten through 2nd grade, don't worry. A lot of the guide is actually the same. Pretty much all our activities are the same. And what we'll be doing as we walk through the curriculum is talking about those different adjustments that you can make depending on your age group and what might be appropriate. That said, of course, you are the ones that are going to know best how your students are going to be able to process and learn from this project. So please take the liberty, the freedom, enjoy tweaking the curriculum as it will fit for your students. We definitely encourage that, and we expect you to do that, obviously, so that your students will get the most out of it. All right, so as we go through the curriculum, on the very first page, which is actually labeled page 2, you'll see that there's a welcome letter there. That, again, kind of encourages you to be flexible with the curriculum, to adapt it to your needs. It also gives you an overview of what you can expect of Project Zoo Lab. The project is pretty much composed of 2 parts. The first part is the weekly broadcast. So every time that you and your students come into the classroom, you'll be watching a broadcast that's live from the Phoenix Zoo with Serena and myself, and animals and videos and all sorts of fun. We would love it if you're able to watch the broadcast first, but we understand that that's not going to be possible for all the schools. So we have designed the curriculum, and we will be doing the broadcast so that if you do it at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of your session each week, it will be okay. You'll be able to follow along. If it's not right at the beginning, you definitely will want to look ahead at the curriculum and see what's going to be happening so that you can kind of adjust and fill in some information for your students at the beginning as you work on the activities that they might have received from the broadcast. You won't have to do all of it, obviously, but just a little bit of backstory for them will probably be helpful. So it will be the broadcast component, and then the other component of the project each week is the classroom activities that you'll be doing. And that's what is detailed in this curriculum here. On page 3, you'll see there's a suggested weekly plan overview. This is just that. It's suggested. Based on how long we think the activities will take, and based on the flow of the program overall, this is what we suggest. Now, if you get into it and you realize all of a sudden that your students for 1 week are so involved with their bookmaking, yes, I'm getting ahead of myself there. We'll come back to that, don't worry. But if they're so involved with their bookmaking that you think it's better to hold off on that week's activity till the next week, that's probably okay. Because we'll have gone through this curriculum, you'll know overall what's going to be happening, and you'll be able to make those adjustments, kind of flow with your students to make the best of it. So let's run through each week, though, as is. In session 1, obviously we have our broadcast. We'll be doing a lot of introductions and introducing of the topic of this year's program, which is animal adaptations. That's what we're going to be learning about. All animals have adaptations. Pretty much everything that you can think of that's cool about an animal, or that an animal does, behaves, eats, body parts, all that sort of stuff, it pretty much is an adaptation of some kind. So this is going to be a really fun year of Project Zoo Lab because there's so much that we can talk about, and we can use a whole lot of the zoo, and we're really excited about that. In the classroom on that first week, we suggest always reviewing the broadcast material in whatever way is appropriate. You're also going to begin your giant list of adaptations, and you're going to be doing 2 brainstorm activities with your students. One is with some animal pictures, and one is watching a video of our tiger here at the zoo. Her name is Hadia, and the video is provided on the Dropbox folder. So it's a very short video, but your students will be watching that. More on that later. Let's move on to week 2. Again, we'll have the broadcast, and we'll review everything from week 1. We'll introduce the project for this year, what the students will be, what they will have as their end product from the project, and that is, as I referenced earlier, that they will be creating a book. There's a whole lot of details that go along with that, so we'll get to that as we go more in depth in the curriculum. But I do want to point out that we're encouraging you to not reveal the end product project until week 2. We don't want to overwhelm the students with moving right ahead to creating their book. We want to make sure they have a good foundation of learning about animal adaptations. So don't reveal that until the second week if possible. During the broadcast in the second week, we're also going to go over predator-prey adaptations and adapting to the environment or finding your niche in the environment. Then in the classroom in that second week, of course, you'll be reviewing the broadcast materials. And one thing I forgot to mention in the first week, each week you're also going to be doing a class vote. That's kind of your homework from the broadcast. And I'll talk more about that, but we're really excited about this and what it's going to mean as far as an overall, another type of end product for Project Zoo Lab. Also in the classroom, you're going to be using, again, your giant list of adaptations. And the kids will start creating their animal. They're going to do some adaptation selection. They're going to sketch their species. And then you'll start moving into kind of a discussion on the books and what that will mean for your class and your students. In week 3, again, we'll be reviewing our previous week's broadcast content, and we'll be talking about the adaptations of flight. Then in the classroom, you'll be reviewing the broadcast materials, doing your class vote, adding to your giant list of adaptations, and starting to write your stories, starting to outline them and write them. And the activity for that week is about bird beaks and adaptations that birds have. In session 4, we'll be, of course, reviewing the content in the broadcast. We'll be doing our vote, all that sort of stuff. And then we're going to talk about adaptations for camouflage and adaptations involving speed and movement in animals. Then in the classroom, you'll do all of the normal stuff, and you'll continue writing your story. You'll start illustrating your story, and the activity is about camouflage. For week 5, this is where we start to get sad because Project Zoo Lab is almost done, but we're still having so much fun. We will, in the broadcast, talk about adaptations of animals that are really big and animals that are super small, and kind of the differences between size, how size ties into adaptations. In the classroom, you'll be doing all your normal stuff. You'll finish writing your story, and you'll add finishing touches to it, which is kind of fun. And there's a lot of really neat activities in week 5. An animal movement activity, an activity about opposable thumbs. These things are wonderful. And activity about the warning signs that some animals have and use. Then in our last broadcast, in the broadcast part, obviously, we're going to be doing a final exploration about animal adaptations. We're going to do our thank yous, wrap things up, talk about donating the books to the Phoenix Zoo, and encouraging your students to come to the zoo days if your district has arranged for that type of experience for the students. And we're going to reveal our ultimate adaptations animal that we have created in Project Zoo Lab. And that is what your students have been voting on every week. So again, more on that. In the classroom, you'll be doing the same thing, wrapping everything up, sharing your stories, binding the books, all the little last things that need to be done, and then saying goodbye and being very sad. Of course, right? Because nobody wants Project Zoo Lab to end. All right, so let's move on to page number 5. is your complete materials list. This is everything that you will need for every single activity in Project Zoo Lab. We designed the curriculum so that these materials are hopefully readily available to you and very easy to acquire if they're not already in your classroom. There's one area of the list where you'll see there's a lot of household kitchen type of items. So hopefully those are things that, again, if you're not able to purchase them or have them from somewhere in your school, that maybe you're willing to bring them from home and just use them on that day for the activity. So everything you need on that materials list. Within each of the activities, you'll see that it's broken up for what materials you need for each of those activities. Right. On page number 6, we have a list of definitions. This is to make sure that we all stay on the same page when we're talking about adaptations and even some things like niche, camouflage, mimicry, hibernation, migration. Those are some words that we'll probably use throughout the project, so we just want to make sure that everybody has a reference to come back to so that we're all talking about these things consistently. I'd like to point your attention to kind of the middle of that page. There's a section that says it's headed with 2 categories of adaptations, and underneath that is behavioral adaptations and physical adaptations. This is how we're kind of grouping things to simplify talking about adaptations, because adaptations, as I said earlier, are huge. Everything about an animal is pretty much an adaptation when you start talking about it. So we're going to kind of divide them into 2 categories, one about behavior and one about the physical adaptations that animals have. Then kind of breaking that down a little bit more, but still in very basic categories, we're keeping the behavior adaptations as one unit, and then we have 2, I should say type, as one type, and then the 2 other types of physical adaptations are body covering adaptations and body part adaptations. So you'll see in the curriculum there's some reference to that of categories versus types, so feel free to check back in with your list of definitions if you need a reminder on what that means to us as how we're framing this information. Okay, and then on page 7, we actually start the activities. I'm going to try to not be, obviously you're all capable of reading, and so I don't want you to feel that I don't think that, but we will go over this in quite a bit of detail so that if anything you have more information and we leave no stone unturned versus less information and anybody feeling confused or like they're not quite sure what we had in mind as we developed the curriculum. So if you're feeling comfortable with everything, that's the beauty of it. You can skip ahead if you'd like, but we definitely encourage you to stick with us if you can, because we're hoping to give you a really good, a complete picture of what we really want this program to look like as a whole, and the things that are important for us to have you emphasize in the classroom versus what we'll be doing in the broadcast. Okay? You'll see that the rest of the activities are not separated into days. Like I said before with that weekly plan, that's where the outline is of how we suggest you divide things up, but we haven't done that within the rest of the curriculum. It's pretty much just a lesson plan for each of the activities so that you can be flexible with your needs. All right, so we're starting on page 7. This should be for everybody. Project Zoo Lab Introduction, Broadcast, and Class Voting. The first session of Project Zoo Lab in the classroom is always the most important and maybe the most chaotic, and I shouldn't say chaotic, but more, there's going to be maybe the most prep work on your part. Because if you're not watching the broadcast first, it's going to be really important that you give your students a good foundation of what our topic is. Hence why we have the list of definitions, so that you have that information in advance, exactly how we're going to talk about it in the broadcast. So for the first session, the broadcast is going to end up being a bit of a review if you are watching it in the middle or the end of your weekly session. So there's some suggested procedure here. If your class is watching the broadcast first and then doing the classroom activities, you can start on number 2. And everybody else, if your broadcast is not first, you'll be starting with the suggested procedure number 1, which just talks about having that introductory discussion with your students about adaptations. Okay. So pretty much you're viewing the broadcast and you're introducing the topic. I don't think I have to go into a whole lot more detail than that. What I do want to go over is in number 3, like I talked about earlier, we're going to have class voting. Let me actually just deviate from the curriculum for a little bit to give you kind of my, in a nutshell, version of where Project Zoo Lab is going. I said earlier that your students will be creating a book, and that book is going to be based on an animal that they create. This is a made-up, fantastical, super cool, stuck together different parts type of animal that is going to have all these wonderful adaptations that they've started to learn about. So our first kind of tasks within Project Zoo Lab are for students to create that animal. They're going to learn, they're going to have this crash course, brainstorm type of activity where they're learning about different adaptations, and then they're going to start creating their own animal by sticking those different adaptations that they think are really neat into something. So we could end up with animals with dolphin tails and elephant heads type of deal. We could end up with mouse heads but elephant trunks, okay? We don't want you to suggest too heavily to your students what these animals should be, because obviously the point is that they're going to be creative. We want them to get excited about different kinds of adaptations and what they want to stick together in making some crazy, like, super freak superhero animal, okay? So then that crazy super freak superhero animal that they have created is going to be sort of the star of their book, okay? And that can mean a lot of different things, because these might be nonfiction books, they might be extensive novels, they might be picture books, so there's a lot of variety of where you're going to take that as far as creating the book. But essentially you're going to have this animal that's going to do cool things or go on neat adventures, and that's going to create your story. So along with that, since the students are creating an animal of their own or for your particular class, we're also going to create a Project Zoo Lab Ultimate Adaptations animal. So this is what you're voting on each week in the class. Okay? We're going to give you sometime during the broadcast a list of 3 adaptations. For example, it might be, what is your favorite adaptation? Webbed feet, sharp claws, or soft furry paws. Okay? Then you'll take that list of 3 multiple choice answers, you'll discuss this with your class, have them all vote on what their favorite one is, decide which one is the winner, and then through a survey link that will be provided to you each week on the projectzoolab.com website, you will select what adaptation was the winner for your particular class. We'll get all those answers. We'll tally which adaptation was the winner for Project Zoo Lab, for all the schools and all the classes that are out there participating this year. And we will have a winner. So let's say Soft Furry Paws wins, okay? We're creating an animal week to week here in secret in our secret zoo animal ultimate adaptation lab that no one knows about but Project Zoo Lab people. We're creating this animal in thanks to our graphics department with all of these adaptations that the students are voting on combined. So by week 6, we're going to unveil the Project Zoo Lab Ultimate Adaptations animal. Okay? And so we hope this will be exciting because it is something that your students are contributing to each week. They are creating this animal that we will reveal at the end. Okay? So that's what we're doing with the voting each week. And that's what, going all the way back to where I started on that, what number 3 is on that first page 7 is talking about the class voting. All right, so moving along to the giant list of adaptations. This is a very important page for you because the giant list of adaptations, and yes, I am going to try to say it like that every time, the giant list of adaptations is something that you're going to come back to every single week in Project Zoo Lab. So the most important thing I can say about this particular activity is think ahead about this for your class. As we design the curriculum, our kind of envisionment, how we envisioned this happening was giant pieces of paper, the sheets of butcher paper, or the big Post-it notes that you can post on the wall. We imagine you having lots of those that you can write all the adaptations on, and then you can take them down, because obviously you won't be able to leave them up in your classroom during the rest of the week, but something that you can take down and put back up again the following week so that the students are always referencing this list. The list is always growing, and you're always able to add to it, of course. So decide how you want to create your giant list of adaptations, and let's see, for this particular one, you're basically just gonna kind of start coming up with some adaptations, okay? We suggest always going to the broadcast first, or using the broadcast, even if your broadcast is last. Try to save a couple minutes afterwards so that you can say, what did we see in the broadcast that was an adaptation? Is it on our list yet? If it's not, let's add it. Okay, so always make sure to double check the information in the broadcast and get your adaptations that you've learned about onto that list. Then we've got some activities that are structured to help students come up with more ideas of different kinds of adaptations that they're going to be learning about in those activities. Make this a challenge for your class. See how many adaptations you can get on this list. I would love it to hear teachers coming back saying, every single part of my wall was covered with paper and adaptations by the end of week 6. That would be so cool. So always, continually encourage and congratulate your students that the list is growing. It'll be just a good visual reminder of how prevalent adaptations are in the animal world. We're also thinking, so keep this in mind moving into the last week, that we will probably ask people to let us know how many adaptations they have put on their giant list. So as you keep that running tally week to week, be prepared that in week 6 during the broadcast, we'll probably have you chat in the number of how many adaptations you have on your list. It'll be fun to see what all the different classes have come up with. Some people might have 20, some people might have 2,000. Seriously, it could be a wide range, but the point is that you've got a great list going. Okay, so our next activity then is called Animal Cards Activity, Adaptation Brainstorming. And this is one where the activity is going to contribute to the giant list. So, let's see, I need to show you the resource. You will find on the Dropbox folder, of course, Animal Cards Worksheets. The first one printed out is a lion that I have. I've got a desert tortoise, an anteater, a giant anteater, all sorts of animals. Everything from rattlesnakes to baboons. Everything from leopards to giraffes. It's just a whole bunch of animal pictures. Okay? There are 2 versions of this resource on Dropbox. There's a PDF that has the large version of photos, so when you print them out, there'll be 1 photo per page. There's also a version where there's 4 photos per page, and you can cut them into fourths. Obviously, that's using less paper. Depending on how you're going to facilitate this activity, though, will probably dictate which resource you want to use, either the full page or the little ones. Always remember, too, with these resources, you can project them onto your screen as well. Like if you don't want to use the actual pages, or maybe you want to use the pages and also project the images so that they're even bigger if you're working as an entire class, that's always an option for you as well. So these are the Animal Cards worksheets. And for this one, you'll need to decide if your students are going to work as individuals, in small groups, or if it's best that you facilitate with the whole class. Obviously, this is where tailoring for your age groups comes in. If you've got a lot of kindergarten students and even first graders, then you might want to think about doing this as a whole class activity. If you've got a high percentage of 5th grade students, then it would be fantastic to do it as an individual, small group, or pair activity. There are also options to extend or modify the activity at the very end of it, and especially for the older students, this is an option where you can have them do more writing in those groups. You can always create a worksheet as well that pairs with this activity to help facilitate writing or answering questions, that sort of thing. We did not develop that for you because it's more important that you use your students' abilities to figure out what's going to work best in that situation. So Overall, though, the students are going to be looking at these pictures, and they're going to be, just by what they can physically see here, trying to pick out some adaptations that this animal would have. And hopefully, as you go through several of the animals, or all the different groups contribute the ideas that they came up with, you're adding tons of adaptations to your giant list. Okay, so it can be anything like, okay, we'll just use the lion one that's on front here. Okay, really easy one to see is that this lion has huge, sharp teeth. Perfect adaptation. Write it on the list. Sharp teeth, big teeth, whatever comes out. Okay. You might also get that the lion is covered with fur. That is an adaptation. Write it on the list, okay, if you don't already have it there. You might have that he's got ears. Maybe you even get a student that says ears that are pointing forward. Okay, write those things on the list. This isn't a great picture for seeing claws, but it's very possible that even though we can't see them in this picture, your students are going to know that a lion has claws, and they might come up with adaptation. Okay, so write it on the list. We want them focused on the picture for this activity, but if they do have some previous knowledge of the animal that is contributing to the ideas that they have, say, I know that lions run fast. I don't know how fast this big guy with the mane's going to run, especially since he's one of our zoo animals. But yes, if they have some previous knowledge of the animal that isn't something directly reflected from this photo, it's fine if you use that too. Okay, this is a brainstorm activity, so kind of anything goes. Of course, we encourage you to ask them why, what might that adaptation be good for, questions like that. All right. I think that pretty much covers that activity. So let's move on to the next one, which ties in very closely to that one, and that's the tiger video activity. Again, it's an adaptation brainstorming activity. The tiger video is just a couple minutes long, was filmed here at the Phoenix Zoo, as all our videos are going to be. At least that's what we're thinking as of when this training is being filmed. All the animals are from the Phoenix Zoo. They are on exhibit here. And the one that you're watching of the tiger is our female tiger, Hadia. And she received some behavioral enrichment. Sometimes at the zoo we refer to this as BE, okay, the abbreviation for behavioral enrichment. If you've been with Project Zoo Lab for, well, since the beginning, now you're actually very familiar with behavioral enrichment. And so it's Hadia the tiger receiving some behavioral enrichment, which has her moving and showing a few behavioral adaptations that obviously we couldn't see just by looking at the still photograph. So it's just one animal that you'll be watching in this video, but hopefully it gives some kind of encouragement to think about those different types of, well, some of them are physical obviously still, and more of the behavioral adaptations, and add to your giant list. That pretty much covers this activity. Quite easy. All right, so we're moving on. I think this is page 11 in everybody's folder, yes. And this activity is My New Animal. So this is where the students are going to be working on creating that fantastical, made-up, mishmashed animal from all these different adaptations that they think is cool. Okay, so the first part of this activity is adaptation selection. You're going to review, obviously, with the students the point of what they're doing, that they're creating their own animal, and that this animal is going to be in some way worked into their book, whether it's adventures or a nonfiction type of writing about that made-up animal, that fictional animal. So the students are going to select at least one adaptation. I would encourage you to encourage them to keep it at one per type of adaptation. So if we go back to our definitions of adaptations, the types that we've got are the behavioral, body covering, and body part. So make sure that they have at least one from each of those categories. So for example, that could mean that their animal runs very fast. No, let's do one that's a little more fun. That could be that their animal flies, that their animal has a trunk as the body part, and that their animal is covered with scales. okay? Obviously, if you think about putting an animal together that does all those things, there is no such animal that we have yet discovered. So have them pick from one adaptation, maybe their favorite, from each type of adaptation, and that's their jumping off point for this animal. Now, obviously, as they keep going, as they draw and that sort of thing, their animal, if we go back to our flying, scaled, has an elephant trunk type of animal, then they're going to add in ears, they're going to add in a mouth, they might add in a tail, and that's all fine. But you want those three that they've picked to kind of be the main focus for how they move forward on creating their animal. Okay, so they need to select, and this will be, this is a good place where you can tailor based on age appropriateness. If you are, okay, I need to back up for a second, but let's say, again, you have older students, make them write down each of their categories or their types of adaptation and which adaptation they're selecting, so that then you can kind of reference, okay, is that actually what you drew later? So you're holding them a little bit accountable. Not that they can't change, though. I want to back up, though, especially for the younger kids, because one thing that we're suggesting that you can do if you have a group of younger students, if you're in the K through 2 age range, instead of individual students doing individual books, we recommend that you can consider doing a class book, or maybe having students work in small groups, so that's a little more manageable for you. If you have a classroom full of kindergarten students, it's going to be a lot of work on you to have them each doing their own book. That said, it does not mean that you can't do that. If you've got the energy, you've got the motivation, then for all means and purposes, please go for it. Do it. If that sounds the best to you and that's what your students are really interested in doing, do it. Okay? There's no right or wrong way to create your book project. But for the younger kids, we've kind of written the curriculum so that it is assuming that you may do a class book, and for the older group of students, we're assuming that the students will each do an individual book. Okay? So as they create their own animals, especially for the younger students, I would encourage you to have each student create their own animal, because it's a fun activity to do and they will all be capable of creating a fun animal. But you may want to then tailor that to be appropriate based on how you're going to be creating your book. So some options could be all the kids create their animals, and then you maybe vote on one animal that's going to be the star of the book, or kind of the main character. The other animals can still be part of the book. Maybe they play supporting roles. Right? Or maybe you combine your books so that there's just sort of a bunch of different chapters or pages where those individual animals are highlighted, and the students will be kind of contributing that page as their contribution to the book. If you'd like, you can do it some other way, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want. There's tons of different options there. But I would definitely encourage you to let them create their own animal and then decide how you want to go from there to create the book. Okay, so after they have decided their adaptations, they're actually going to create the animal. And this procedure is a little bit of a transition from the selection into the drawing. Let's see, students have figured out what their animal will be. They've figured out how all their adaptations will fit together. You can have them share their animals and their ideas in small groups. It's a great way to get them talking and sharing ideas, which might give them different ideas as well. Also make sure that they consider what environment their animal will live in and what type of food it will need to survive, if it will hunt, or if it will be eating plants, all that sort of stuff, because that will perhaps play into your story later, and we want them thinking about how those adaptations in real life actually do affect what an animal eats or how it hunts, etc. And then, of course, we're transitioning into the species sketch. And there is another resource on Dropbox for you to access. So these are in suggested procedure number 2. It says there's 3 examples of field notes that you can offer to the students. These are illustrations. done by scientists or just amateurs as they found animals in the field. Some of them are newer, some of them, like this fish one, is I think a little older. It's kind of an archived one. And there's also one of a jellyfish. That one's cool because it's got some color in it as well. But what you'll see is not only are there sketches and sometimes different angles of the animal or certain body parts of the animal that are kind of blown up so that they can show detail, but there's also all these notes to the sides of them. And that's what we want you to emphasize to the students as they do their species sketches. Not only are they just doing a drawing, but they're also putting all the details on there that somebody would need to know or want to know if they were learning about this animal for the first time. So if this was a field illustration of our winged, scaled, elephant-trunked animal, we would want lots of details on here about what it eats, where it was found, maybe how it flies. Does it fly in a straight line? Does it fly up and down? Does it fly side to side? Does it fly backwards all the time? So details like that. Maybe they want to, if they haven't colored their picture, maybe they want to make arrows that show where colors were on the body of the animal. So all those sorts of things. Shouldn't just be a simple sketch. We want it to be a little more detailed if possible. If you have young students, when they do their sketch, if they're not able to write all those details on there, then take time to go around your classroom and talk to them about their sketches and their animals. And you might even want to be the one that writes those things on there that they told you. This eventually will be a great thing to send home so that parents can then ask the students about, oh, it says that your animal, flies backwards. Tell me more about that. So you might want to help with the writing on there if you have young students. Okay, and pretty much that's kind of the overall concept for the species sketch. And now we have this created animal that will move forward as we create our books. Okay? One thing that we've put as a note at the end of this lesson plan is that we'd ask you to consider having the students include these sketches as part of the finishing touches in their book, kind of a where the whole story came from or where it originated. So that might be something, I have in here, the author's inspiration page. Okay? So you might want to hang on to those and include them in the books as you bind them at the very end. Okay? All right, the next activity that is in the curriculum is the superhero discussion. This is something that can really happen anytime. As the students are working, you might want to just go around and kind of start this discussion. It's a very informal conversation that you can start, but it's a way to kind of tie the animal adaptations, what they're learning about, into things that are pretty normal and relevant in their life. Okay? Kids love going to movies. Kids love reading books. Kids love watching cartoons. Okay? And most kids know about superheroes. Okay? The cool thing about superheroes is that they have all these adaptations that are funky and weird and not human usually. Okay? If you think of Spider-Man, who can climb up a wall, or Captain America that can fly. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not really well versed in my superhero powers, but there are probably tons of ones out there that are not as old school as that the kids know about. And so we want you to try to have them connect those things. What's their favorite superhero, and what adaptations does that superhero have? Maybe how is that similar to an animal? Do they know an animal that has that type of adaptation? Is there a superhero that can breathe underwater? Okay, well, what's that like? Like a fish, like a shark? So have them make those connections between human superhero adaptations and animal adaptations. Okay. The next one is the book format discussion. Again, I've been referencing a lot how there are so many different options for what you can do for your class or individual student books. Okay? And we've got this in here just so that you make sure to spend some time communicating with your class, with your students, about what that part of the project is going to look like for them and for your class. Okay? So that's pretty much it. If you're doing a class book, make sure they understand that. Make sure they understand what their contribution to the class book is going to be. If they're doing an individual book, make sure they understand what requirements you might set for that. Does it have to be a certain number of pages? Do you want a certain type of book? And as we move forward into the next activity, which is the book exploration, so these all go very much hand in hand, we'd like you, if possible, to bring in different types of books so that the students can have something to model and can understand the different types that you're talking about. Obviously, your older students will hopefully be well-versed in the different types of books that are out there, but for your younger students, this might be a first kind of formal introduction as to different types of books. Hopefully not if your librarian's doing a great job, but sometimes that can be hard because there's so much to do when they have library time anyway. So the different types of books that you might want to bring in, and of course you can check these out from your school library, use what you have in your classroom, go to the library near your house. A picture book, one with no words or very, very few words, so very strong on pictures. An early reader book, something that has a lot of illustrations still, but is starting to have a little bit more text. A novel type of book where it's pretty much all text, very few illustrations. A nonfiction book, this could be a textbook that you have in your classroom, or some sort of, like they have the eyewitness books or things like that, where it's just about a particular animal or a particular subject. And then consider having creative options too. I was thinking a pop-up book would be a really neat option. Maybe one of your kids wants to make a pop-up book, if they're very visual and kind of creative in that way. So any kinds of books that you can think of, bring them there, have them out for the students, let them look them over, talk about them, and you're done with that activity. Good job. All right, so we're now transitioning into actually writing our story, creating what our story is going to be. We have our animal, we've decided what our book format is going to be, but now we have to decide what the book is about. So we're going to do a story outline. And obviously you all know what an outline is. This can be as informal or as formal as you would like it to be, depending on the age and abilities and interest of your students and of you to teach it. It can be just like, hey, let's kind of get a storyline up there, kind of like a storyboard in a way, like this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Or it can literally be Roman numeral 1, A, B, all that sort of stuff. And they can do it as a class, or they can do it as individuals. So your stories may change as you go through it and you actually begin writing them. Obviously, this is a creative process, and please, I can't say that enough, please let it be a creative process. If things change, if they've designed and drawn their whole animal and now they start writing their story and it becomes a totally different animal, that's fine, let it happen. Okay? But obviously, having these different parts is great practice as they're going through different elements in school. Okay, so kind of got our outline done at that point. Okay, so now we're shifting into a couple fun activities that you'll be doing in the classroom. The first one is the bird beak activity. I believe for everyone this is on page 15. Okay, it's on 16 if you have the K through 2 curriculum. This is the activity that is going to make use of all of those household and kitchen utensils. And this is a really fun activity. We do this one a lot at the zoo, and I hope that you really get into it. I would caution you that one of the most important things about this activity is making sure that you are explaining it well to the students, because you want them to make the connection between the household tools and kitchen utensils that we're using are like the different types of bird beaks. Obviously, humans don't have bird beaks, so we have created these tools that help us to do the same sorts of things that the bird beaks can already do. That's kind of the connection that we want to have made. If you don't have that, then all of a sudden it's just kitchen tools and bird beaks, and it can be confusing for students. So especially if you have younger students, really take the time to make those connections and ensure that they're understanding what this activity is all about. So there is a packet, a resource packet for you with more photos for this activity, and these are all photos of birds. So the first one starts with a macaw, and I believe, let me just double check real quick. Yes. On the next page, or the second part of the bird beak activity in your curriculum, there's a section of teacher information, and that has all of the birds that are in this packet. So if there's a bird that you don't know what it is, it's explained in there. Of course, we don't expect you to know every bird out there. We sure don't know every bird out there. But it gives you a little bit of information about what each of those birds eats, and it's kind of your cheat sheet as well of what kitchen tool would be equivalent to that type of beak and the use of the beak. Okay, so the teacher information is sort of for your eyes only. That's your guide to make sure that the kids are coming up with the right answers, or at least going the right general direction. Okay, that said, there are some tools that kids will come up with different ideas for. I mean, you might have a pipette, and they decide it matches with something other than the hummingbird, which I believe is what? Yes. Okay, so they might, for some reason, they might say it goes with the spoonbill. Okay? If that's what they're going to answer, find out why. That's another important part of this activity. As long as they're thinking in the right way as far as why would that be similar to an adaptation, if they can give you a good reason, then go with it. Okay? If it seems way off base, then obviously you want to try to redirect and bring that back to where we want the information to go. So you're going to introduce the activity. I'm going to go through this one in a little bit more detail since it can be a little bit more difficult of an activity. You're going to introduce it as one that helps the students to learn about bird beaks and how their beaks are specialized for the type of food that they eat. Of course, if something is specialized, then it's an adaptation. Okay? And this, of course, is a body part adaptation in particular, since we're talking about beaks specifically. To make it relevant for the students, like I said earlier, begin by explaining that people have also adapted based on the food. And so at first we're going to talk about their teeth. Okay, so you can have them stick their fingers in their mouth and feel around their teeth. If you have a mirror in your classroom, have them go look in the mirror and see the different kinds of teeth that they have. You can talk about the incisors, the canines, and their molars. Obviously, we don't have giant, sharp teeth like a lion, but we do have our canines that are sharper, pointier than our molars, which are flat and are grinding teeth. So humans are obviously omnivores. Most people eat a mix of meat and plants, so that's why we have two different types or more of teeth. Then you'll kind of transition into, since we're advanced species, right, and we can think and we can create tools, we have done just that. We've created tools to use in the kitchen to help us prepare our food. Since we don't just eat our food when we find it, we like to cook it and season it and all sorts of stuff like that. We have these different tools that help us to do that. Okay, so you're going to show the kids the array of utensils that you have gathered and ask them to tell you what it is usually used for by people. Okay, some of these they will definitely know. They'll know that a knife is for cutting. Some of them they might not know. They might not have ever seen a T-ball or a sifter or a strainer, or they may not have ever seen a little pipette. So you might have to give some examples of how those would be used, particularly for cooking food. Then you're going to transition into the discussion of bird beaks. Okay, so kind of leave the kitchen tools behind for a second and just have the students think about the different shapes of beaks that they've seen on a bird. They'll be able to tell you some different ones just from birds that they know, whether it's a flamingo or a penguin or a pelican, okay, or a pigeon for that matter. So have them talk about those different shapes of beaks, and maybe if they can even tie in what they know those animals eat and how those beaks might be useful for that. Okay? Then you'll bring in your packet of photos. Okay? So after they've kind of brainstormed on their own, then you'll bring in the photos and more specifically talk about the differences and similarities between the beaks based on the birds in the photos. And then transition to talking about the different types of food that each of those birds eat in the pictures. So use your teacher cheat sheet information for that. And then finally is when you get to matching the tools to the beaks. Okay, so hopefully you've done enough discussion about the tools and enough discussion about the beaks that the students will be able to see the correlation between, okay, this does this as a kitchen tool and this does this as a bird beak. So have them match those up. And of course I should add, always make sure that any of these adaptations you're talking about, that you're adding them to the what? The giant list of adaptations. Yes, we all love it by now, don't we? All right, to extend or modify this activity, you can have the students break into small groups and give them each a kitchen utensil. And you can print out a bunch of different copies of the photos and have them match and kind of do it more like a station activity, or you can have them So yeah, you can do it as a station. You can do it and have them take something, a small group takes one of the tools and a bunch of the pictures, and then they have to report back what they found and what they think works. Another thing that you can do if you have a little bit more time and resources as far as collecting more materials, this is a fun part of this activity that's a great extension if you have time. So please try to find time, it's cool. You'll find things that are similar to bird food, what birds would eat, okay? So you might have, if you can pick, okay, so I'll just read it right from here. You might use the strainer for getting floaty things out of a bowl of water, okay, if you can find something that floats in the water. Even use leaves or something like that. The tweezers obviously are good for picking up small things, so you might bring in a couple pebbles and have them pick those up. But if you have something bigger like plastic bugs, then the tongs might be better for picking those up. But using the tweezers to pick small little pieces of leaves out of a bowl of water is going to be very hard. So basically you're having the kids use these tools as if they were birds eating. And their goal is to just kind of experience how it's really important if there's an animal that is straining stuff out of water to get their food, that they don't have a tweezer-like beak. That's not going to be very successful. It's going to take them forever to get all their food. Okay, versus those animals with the big beaks that are more straining, like a strainer, are going to have a much easier time. Right? So that is a fantastic way to do that. Okay, so now we're on to the classroom camouflage activity. And there is an optional introduction for this one, which is fun if you have time to do it. It's also a lot of fun because it gives you an opportunity to go outside, or that's how I would encourage you to do it, to go outside and ideally find a grassy location. Even if it's dead grass, that's fine, but you'll have to match your colors appropriately. So for the introductory activity, you're going to get toothpicks, and some of them have to be colored. At least some of them have to be colored. If you're going to be in green grass, make sure that you have some green toothpicks. If you're going to be on dead grass, make sure that you have some of the just wooden, tan colored toothpicks, and then a variety of other colors as well. You want to make sure that you count how many toothpicks you have. Maybe it's 10 of each color or something like that. And you're going to spread them out over a certain area in the grass. Okay, this can be done literally like throw them out there in advance. If you want, you can use a string to make the boundaries of the area maybe, and just put the toothpicks inside there. But pretty much you're going to bring your students out to this area where the toothpicks are, and you're going to give them 10 seconds to find toothpicks, okay? You want to keep it a short amount of time because the goal is that they don't find all the toothpicks. Ultimately, what this is going to do is that they're going to pick out the most toothpicks that are not green or tan, and they're going to have the most of those because they stand out the most, okay? They're not camouflaged. And then you'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Why was it easiest to find those? Why was it difficult with the others? Count the toothpicks and see how many you came up with. Go back out to the area again after you've counted those and see if you can find the rest of them. So that's just a good kind of precursor to then moving into the activity which they'll be completing, which is going to be camouflaging an animal for their classroom. All right? You'll want to, of course, introduce the concept of camouflage as an animal adaptation, so make sure that's on your list. And it can be as general, just to give you an example, it can be as general as camouflage, and that's what's on your list. Or it could be stripes, it could be spots, it could be something more about animal patterns or certain colors that might blend in with an environment. So see what your students come up with as far as being really specific to a certain type of camouflage or just general. Okay. You're going to explain to them that many animals have colors or markings on their body, feathers, and scales. That's what I was kind of just talking about, that help them to blend into their adaptation, or blend into their habitat. And this is, of course, a body covering adaptation. Okay? Camouflage and those colors and patterns are a type of body covering. So you're going to ask students how camouflage helps them to survive, maybe come up with some certain animals that do camouflage and how that's beneficial. The example we give is a white Arctic fox and how that animal obviously blends in with the snow. Okay, and then you're going to give each student an animal cutout. Okay, so this is a resource that is in the Dropbox folder or on your CD, and if you want, you can do this however you want. You can give them the whole page and they get to do 3. You can print this out and cut them up in advance, and each child gets 1. You can let them pick, you can just assign them, that's up to you, okay? But here are 3 templates of some basic animals. They are, as I said, basic, so this should also be pretty easy for them to cut out if you want them to cut them out versus you cutting them out in advance. Right? You can also consider giving them, if you do give them the whole sheet, have them draw or color them before they cut them out. That way when they go outside the lines, then when they cut it out, the pattern is all over it. Sometimes it's hard, especially for the little kids, to draw on something that's already cut out. Okay, so those are your shapes. Each student will get at least 1 animal shape, and the goal of this activity is for the students to look around the classroom and find the spot. Okay, so my spot's over there. They're going to find a spot where they're going to hide their animal. Now, they have to color their animal to blend in with that spot. Where I'm looking right now is a nice white shade over a window. Solid white. So guess what? I wouldn't have to color my animal at all. That may or may not have been why I picked that example. No, but if they're going to put it on a poster, then they have to color it at least the same colors, or maybe try to replicate the poster exactly. Or maybe it's just a poster that has a lot of busyness on it, so they just want to make it lots of different colors so it kind of blends in, versus if they put it on a blank wall, obviously they either want to try to match that color or just have it be very kind of nondescript, because there are no patterns. Okay, so they're going to color their animal to camouflage in a certain location. Then you're going to have them go place their animals in their spot, okay? Have them put the animals in their home. And then just as a class, kind of have a discussion. How did everybody do? Can we see them? You can make this a game in whatever way you want. You can have kids close their eyes as they go and place animals in their location, and then everybody has to open their eyes and try to find the animals around the classroom. If you know where they're going and your class is large enough that you can memorize where the animals are supposed to go, then you can place them around and have everybody close their eyes. So lots of options there. And make sure that you have a really healthy discussion about why things camouflaged, maybe even why it was difficult for them to color the animal to be camouflaged to that particular place. Okay? And any new thoughts that you come up with as far as adaptations, make sure to add it to the giant list of adaptations. Okay? An extension for this activity is that you can kind of do the reverse as well. A lot of animals use camouflage so that they blend in with their environment, but some animals use color to draw attention to them as well. Sometimes this is because an animal is poisonous, and so by having really bright colors and kind of warning themselves as, whoa, I'm a dangerous animal, that's more beneficial than camouflaging in with the environment. So you can give them a second round of an animal cutout and have them either go to the same place, their animal lives in the same home that it did before, or they can pick a new place, but this time they have to color their animal so that it stands out. Just like the toothpicks, pretty much. If you've done that as the optional beginning of the activity, it should be very obvious that when the animals were colored to be camouflaged, it was hard to see them. When they stood out and were very different colored than the environment they were in, then it was easy to find them. So hopefully there's a good comparison and a really big difference between how many animals they could find. Okay, so that is that activity. I believe the rest of the, oh no, I'm lying, okay? So, moving on to book illustrations. Okay, this is a pretty simple one. Obviously, illustrating is part of the creative process, so it may work that you have your students write their story and then they illustrate it afterwards. If you have younger students, they may have been illustrating the whole time because that's mainly what they're doing. But you definitely want to have them illustrate in some sort of way, and that could be creative pictures or more scientific illustrations. Could depend on the type of book that they're doing as well. The finishing touches, our next detailed activity, is just what it sounds like. All those kind of little things that make a book just kind of pull a book together and make it look really complete and awesome for the students, okay? So we've suggested a few options for what those finishing touches might be. You could have them do a cover for their book, obviously, which would include the title and some illustrations on the cover. They can do a title page. And going back to the book exploration, when you had all the different books in your classroom, this is a really great time to have books out again so that kids can model off of what is out there in the books, so they can see what a title page looks like in a book, okay? Usually on a title page there aren't illustrations, but on the cover there might be. The title page is just kind of a boring page with the title and the author. So give them those examples again if you can. They can do an acknowledgement page, so anyone that they want to dedicate their book to or thank for the help on the book, or just make their mom and dad proud and write, "For Mom and Dad." They can do an author biography, especially the older students. Have them write a little bit about themselves. Have them include what they like writing about or the types of books that they like to read best. They can even draw a self-portrait, because authors will often have photos of themselves inside a book cover, say. And also, they can do page numbers too. And then I'm going to back up and remind you that we are, at the end of the project, asking students if they would like, or your class, to donate your book to the Phoenix Zoo. And I'll tell you more about that just after I finish this. So if they're going to be donating their book to the Phoenix Zoo, one of the things that we have at the end that's kind of our celebratory certificate of completion type of deal is a book plate. Okay, we have special designed Phoenix Zoo Project Zoo Lab book plates that the students can put inside their books. There's two versions. There's one if they're going to donate their book, and there's one if they don't want to donate their book. Regardless, we'd encourage you to have them have a space inside their book where that book plate can go. The book plates are included as a file on Dropbox, so you can take a look at those and see what you need to plan for in regards to that. So your finishing touches can be all sorts of things. Encourage your students to get creative. If you have ideas that we didn't list, go with it, okay? And the finishing touches are also a great way to have students fill time, essentially. So if you have a student that wrote and illustrated their book super quick, and now they're kind of sitting around looking for something to do, that's a great time to encourage them to do one of those finishing touches. Hey, Stevie, I see that you finished your book. Why don't you write an author biography? Oh, look, you finished that. Okay, why don't you draw a self-portrait? Okay, I see you haven't numbered your pages yet. So that can be things that you require all your students to do, or they can be great time fillers to even out the different completion times that students might have. All right, now we have a couple fun activities. Okay, kind of a whole slew of them to almost finish up the curriculum. And the first one in the packet is the animal movement activity. Our activities so far have really focused on the body coverings and the body parts. So this is a fun one that is a little more physical and helps the students to focus on the movements of animals. Of course, that's going to relate to the body parts that they have and possibly to the body coverings that they have as well. But this is a little bit more of a focus on behavior adaptation. So hopefully, even though it's getting kind of late in the project, all of Project Zoo Lab, by the time you get to this activity, hopefully it will help you come up with some new adaptations to add to your giant list. Okay? So you can kind of introduce it as another way to brainstorm and add to your list. And you're going to have them brainstorm about different animal movements. This can be as simple as walking, running. It can be more like climbing, slithering. All sorts of different verbs are going to come out here. And let's see. Okay, so further down then, there's another section that's kind of your cheat sheet. The teacher information and animal suggestions list. So you can select an animal from the list and call it out to the students. It's fun to have the students move like that animal, Some of the animals, they might not know how to move like, so you might have to demonstrate or look to another student that does know how that animal moves. Okay, so you're getting the student's physical, and then you're also talking about how that movement relates to adaptations, behavior adaptations. Okay. You can consider adding details to solicit certain movements. So the example we've given you is you can have students move like a lion. But if they're just crawling around on their hands or feet, just kind of a normal crawl, maybe you want to call something out like move like a lion stalking its prey. Okay, so that's going to give a different sort of kind of creeping maybe, that they might slow down their pace, they might put their head a little bit lower, so you're kind of soliciting some different types of movement there, and hopefully coming up with some different types of adaptations because of that. Right? So under the teacher information and suggestions, the animals that we have are lion, penguin, giraffe, gibbon, frog, gorilla, sloth, snake, rattlesnake, whale, lizard, tortoise, parrot, rabbit, elephant, kangaroo, seal, squid, flea, crab, and hummingbird. So a big variety, and we've tried to give you a few prompts if you want to kind of solicit those certain movements. Or if there's a particular animal, like the gibbon, which is the fourth one down on the list, they brachiate. So they swing on their arms from one to the next, and gibbons are really funny when they're on the ground because they still keep their arms up like this. So when they walk, they kind of walk like this, and it's very funny looking, and that's a fun one that your kids will like to do if you can demonstrate that for you. So was that all in the shot? All right, so that is animal movement, and then we'll move on to thumbs activity. Okay? Told you at the beginning that opposable thumbs are great, and you need them for this activity, but you don't get to use them for this activity. Okay? During the whole activity, your kids can't have thumbs. So that knife that you had in the, I'm just kidding, okay? But you need some tape, right? You need lots of tape is what I suggest for that activity. Because what you're going to do is you're going to tape around their hand. You can use Scotch tape, you can use masking tape, you can use an ace bandage. I would probably suggest not using duct tape. You might end up getting in trouble for that. Okay, so keep it a little more, a little easier than that. But you want some sort of tape that's going to hold their thumb into their palm. And kind of get it in there as tight as you can. I mean, it doesn't have, you don't have to wrap their whole hand, but kids will try to escape out of the tape. Kids will try to rip through the tape a little bit. So I also suggest, because they're going to want to do that, that you make sure to emphasize to them in this activity that that's not the point of the activity. You know they can escape if they want to. They're quite capable, and it is just a piece of tape. Okay? But we're doing this activity because it's really fun to do stuff without our thumbs. All right? So first of all, of course, you want to make sure to explain to your students what an opposable thumb is. So I have listed a scientific definition for you in case you were even a little confused on how to define an opposable thumb. I will admit I had to look this up. I didn't know how to specifically define an opposable thumb. But it is, an opposable thumb is defined as digits that can rotate to allow direct matched contact between the thumb and the pads of other fingers. So you can have your kids figure this out by pretty much having them press each finger to their thumb like this. You can see that you can get fingertip or finger pad to finger pad on every single finger, and that's because your thumb rotates over here to your palm to allow you to do that. Okay, if your thumb was just stuck out here in place, obviously you couldn't touch your pads together. Okay, so because this thumb moves all around, we can do all sorts of very cool stuff that animals without opposable thumbs cannot do. Okay, so explain to them what an opposable thumb is, and then make sure that they understand that how much they use their thumb. You probably want to talk about that a little bit. Then you can structure this activity in stations. You can have the kids do this all as a group together. You can pair them up, have them work in small pairs. Again, lots of options for how you facilitate. But there is a whole list of task ideas that you can have them do without their thumbs. Okay? And if you haven't ever done this activity yourself, try it. You don't even have to tape your thumb there. Just put it over like this, and try a couple of these things, it is surprisingly hard. Maybe not so surprisingly hard if you really think about it, but we've got everything on here from picking up a piece of paper to tying a balloon, I think we had. Oh, blowing up a balloon and tying it. So you take for granted that when you blow a balloon, you usually are using your thumbs and your fingers like this. And then to tie it in a knot, obviously, is next to impossible if you don't have your thumbs. So all of these things are, a range of dexterity is needed to do them with your thumbs, and when you take away the thumbs, it's really hard. So you end up with this crazy laughing classroom full of kids trying to do these things with no thumbs, and you're going to love it, and they're going to love it too. So I hope you have a lot of fun with this activity. There are some extensions for this activity as well. You can have students answer some certain questions. This would be a great one if you wanted to create a worksheet to have them go around stations with and answer those kind of follow-up discussion questions. And you can also have them, you can have a stopwatch, or 2 or 3, and you can have them time how long it takes them to do certain activities with or without thumbs available. Picking up a piece of paper with a thumb is very easy. It might take you 7 to 10 seconds to do it if you don't have a thumb, though. Okay? Make sure they don't cheat. If they cheat, it's no fun. If they don't cheat, you're going to love it. All right, moving on to our last kind of big classroom activity. It's the warning signs activity. And this one goes a little bit back to if you do the extension on the camouflage activity, where we were saying that some animals use warning colors where they're, they contrast their environment instead of camouflaging with their environment. This is kind of along those similar lines, but it includes more than just the coloration. Okay, so this can be coloration. But it can be noises, like making a hissing noise. It can be a rattle from a rattlesnake tail. Many of us are familiar with when dogs get scared or frightened or are being aggressive. The hackles, the hairs on the back of their neck, right behind their head, will stand up. And that's kind of a warning sign to other dogs that that animal is, being aggressive or is scared. So we're going to have students come up with a list of adaptations that are related to an animal's warning signs. So, say being able to raise up hairs on the back would be an adaptation for a dog and other animals with fur. And they're going to discuss their ideas of different types of warning signs that animals have. You can ask them questions like, how do you know when a dog is mad? Okay. The hackles might be one, might also be showing its teeth, growling, lunging forward, barking. So picking an animal like that that's very familiar to most kids is a great way to transition them into having the discussion about the more exotic animals that we've been learning about throughout Project Zoo Lab. Okay? Any new adaptation that comes up, write it on the giant list. And then you're going to transition to actually talking about the activity instructions. And that is that the students are going to be creating their own warning sign. Okay? Again, you can have them do this in groups, as individuals, split the class in 2 even if you want, and each team comes up with a different warning sign. Okay? You want to explain that the adaptation... sorry, catching up on what it actually says in here. Yeah, warning signs, they can be behavioral adaptations, okay? So we talked about things like growling or lunging, or physical adaptations where a new body part actually is kind of develops or is adapted over time. Something like... Okay, so they can construct things like that too. If they want to construct a body part versus just doing a physical behavior, you can have supplies out there for them to create, a headband with some sort of horn or something that, I don't know, as they create it, like they pull it and something stands up or something pops up. All those can be things that they can develop as part of their warning sign. Okay, so decide if you want to have them use optional items like that. And give them time to create their warning sign. And then pretty much once everybody has figured out what their warning sign is, Have them mingle around the class, or if you're doing it in teams, like one side does it and the other side does it, and they're going to demonstrate their warning signs as they meet up with their other classmates. So in the curriculum it says, think about it like an icebreaker activity where you're kind of meeting and exchanging information about yourselves, but in this case you're exchanging warning signs as you meet up. So no inciting of violence, of course, in the classroom, but it is kind of interesting because you might end up with a lot of posturing, in a sense, of how the animals are, giving off those warning signs. And that's what we want. We want to see those different demonstrations of the warning signs. And then everybody can be friends afterwards. Okay? So regroup as a class after that and discuss. Were there any students that had particularly scary warning signs? Were there funny ones or creative ones? So just have everybody talk about what they saw and experienced. It's fun to think about meeting somebody on the street that actually did that to you. What would you do? Would you be warned off, or would you think it was funny? How would you react to that? And then have them think about if humans already have warning signs. Okay, this can be things like, if you see me doing this, probably not going to think I'm too approachable. That's kind of my warning sign of, I don't really want to talk about you, I'm not in a good mood. So have them come up with some of those body language things that humans do. Some of those are going to be behavioral adaptations, okay? Do we have any physical adaptations? Probably not so much as far as actual body parts or body coverings, but you can think about certain things that people might wear, kind of add to their person, that could at times be a warning sign. So there could be a lot of interesting things that come out of this discussion. All right. And if you've just had the kids mingling kind of one-on-one amongst themselves, you might want to have a couple kids come up in front of the classroom and demonstrate their warning sign to the class too. That can be another good way to generate discussion. Right? So then we were on our very last page of the curriculum. Aren't you getting sad? No, you're all rejoicing. It's almost over, right? So, of course, we've written these books over all of these weeks, and so you need some way of binding them together if you have a bunch of loose pages. So this is a pretty easy task, but an important one. Your school might be fortunate enough to have a spiral binder. If you want to use that, great. If you want to use the little brass fasteners, you can use those. You can tie your books with string. You can use the 3-ring holder fastener things. I don't know what they're called. But pretty much you want to bind your book in some way, and we're encouraging you to create as hard of a cover, front and back, as possible. This is especially important if the students or your class are going to be donating the book to the Phoenix Zoo, which I never talked about, so we got to come back to that. So the thicker the front and back cover you can have, the more protected the book is going to be over time, obviously. That could be as much as cardstock, or it could be something more like cardboard, or whatever resources you have available, though. Okay. And make sure, again, that they have that blank page inside their cover that you can put the book plate on. And congratulate them on making such a great product. This is where we're really getting into the celebration of everything they've been doing for the last 6 weeks. So make this a big deal. I mean, we want you to be encouraging them along the way, and being supportive of the work they're doing and getting them excited about it. That's the biggest thing, as you know. If you're excited about the project, that's going to be reflected in how the kids are doing everything. So at this point, though, we're wrapping everything up, and so we're getting excited about all the work that we've done the last few weeks. Sharing those stories is important, too. If it's a class book and it's finally all put together, maybe you read it one last time as a class. If they're individual books, maybe you have students swap. They can just swap within their friends and read them. Or maybe you want to read excerpts from each or some of the books. But it's really important that you, again, kind of celebrate what they've done and give that acknowledgement to the class on kind of a bigger scale than just to each individual student. Okay, so make a big deal out of this part. This is the fun part. And so then at the end here is the actual invitation for book donation and the book plates. Okay, so I've already talked about the book plate being a resource, and the 2 versions of it that are in the Dropbox folder for you. I don't have printouts of those today. So you'll kind of I want you to ceremoniously present these to the students. If you were in Project Zoo Lab last year, if you were a teacher for our Zoo Lab or Zoo Vet one, we had a certificate that the students got at the end. This is kind of this year's version of the certificate of completion, okay? They get their book plate. It is kind of the culminating activity to the 6 weeks of work. If you've designed a class book, feel free to print these out and just give them to each of the students, and they can bring them home kind of more as a certificate, or even put them in a book that they have at home or that they've written at home, or encourage them to go home and write a book with their families at home and use that book plate. Okay? That would be a great way to try to transition it to the families. But so we've got these book plates. They go in the books, and we would love it for you to encourage the students to donate their books for the Phoenix Zoo. Here's the deal. We have remodeled what used to be our schoolhouse, which is a building down on the Harmony Farm where the petting zoo is at the Phoenix Zoo. We've remodeled this. It's now called the Windmill House, and it's going to be an excellent space for the public, for our visitors as they come to the zoo. On the farm, when it's hot or when it's cold, it's a great way to kind of get out of the elements. We're going to have some interactive things in there that families can take advantage of. And it's also a space that's used for our children's programming at the zoo as well. We do a lot of our early childhood programming out of that space. One of the things that we would really like to start developing is a library of books, particularly for our guests that come to the zoo, that use that space just kind of as a free play type of space. And we thought that having books written by children for children would be a fantastic way to start that library. So that's why we're asking or soliciting all of the students and your classes to donate the books. If your district has arranged to have a zoo day, that's fantastic. Within your district, we'll probably be working with us to kind of coordinate sometimes within those specific days, if you've chosen a specific day, where myself and our other host for Project Zoo Lab, Serena, will be out kind of accepting the donations of the books during a certain time that day. It'd be a great chance for the kids to come down and meet us in person, and again, another ceremony type of event for them to donate those books to the zoo and see where they're going to be. So we hope that that's possible. If their students are not able to come to the zoo day, they may still donate their books. They can give them to you, and you can make your magic work to get them to us. They can bring them into the zoo any day that they visit, even if they can't attend on the scheduled zoo day for your school or your district. They can just bring them in and drop them off at our front entrance, and we'll make sure that they get to the library. So that's a really exciting kind of final part of this project that we hope you'll really encourage them towards, and let us know if there are any questions on that. But like I said earlier, the book plates will kind of designate the book as theirs. So also let them know whenever they come back to visit the zoo, they can come and they can find their book, they can look at their friends' books, and they can see. They'll kind of be famous at the zoo for the books that they've contributed. Okay? So I think that covers, well, that does cover all the curriculum itself. Just as a super quick review again, we're creating the animals, and then those animals are helping to create the books, which then hopefully will be donated to the Phoenix Zoo at the end. Our overall topic is about adaptations, and you can't go wrong because pretty much anything that you can come up with about an animal is going to be an adaptation of some sort. Okay? If you're watching this, then most likely we are available for questions at this point now, so feel free to chat in and ask us any questions about the curriculum or the project in general. If you think of something after this webinar is finished, then please feel free to get in touch with your coordinator, who will either be able to answer the questions for you or can relay them along to us, and we'll make sure to get you an answer if there's something that you're unsure of or would like to know. All right, we're very much looking forward to working with you, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.